This is Pastor Andrew Grosjean again from Canaan Baptist Church, and I'd like to give you the sermon summary for Lot's Road to Destruction. This is based out of Genesis chapter 13 in verse number 10. And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan that was well watered everywhere before the Lord, destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest to Zoar. Then Lot chose him all the plains of Jordan. And Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves one from another. The Bible shows us in the story of Lot a very interesting progression of events that lead to Lot really dying in obscurity and tragedy. He started off well. He had wealth, all that he needed, maybe too much, and he had a good family. Abraham as his adopted father and physical uncle. He had everything he needed, but his greed caused him to look toward Sodom, and because of that greed, he separated from Abraham. There was that whole contention between Abraham's servants and Lot's servants, and instead of working it out, Lot decided to just separate from Abraham. Abraham said, "I'll go this way, you go that way." And we see that the first step in Lot's progression to destruction was that he looked toward Sodom. And the Bible tells us that if we look toward the world, we're gonna end up in trouble. Jesus said, "You cannot serve two masters. You'll love the one and hate the other." And here we see that Lot looked toward Sodom. Now we see the problem starting here because he had no altars in his life. Abraham was constantly building altars to God, but we don't find Lot making one altar to the Lord. Now we know from the New Testament that he was in fact a believer, because he's called a righteous man, but he afflicted his soul daily with the unrighteous deeds of the Sodomites. And so Lot started on his road to destruction because he didn't stay close to God. He had no altars. He also had no accountability. He was leaving himself, he was separating himself from the only spiritual influence in his life, his uncle, his adopted father, Abraham. It was the only spiritual accountability that he had in his life, and he was going away. Too many young people leave their home before it's time. The Bible tells us when a man should leave his father and mother. It's when he's married. And God's best plan is for a man, a young woman, a young man to stay at home until they are married. For this reason shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. So we see that he looked toward Sodom, then he leaned toward Sodom. See, the next time we see Lot here in verse 13, Genesis 13:13, but the men of Sodom were, in verse number 12, and Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. He's not just looking now, he's moving in the direction of Sodom. And that's how true it is. When in all of our lives, when we look, we start to lean. It's true that when you're in a car, you start looking over here, and without knowing it, without realizing, you look back and you find yourself having turned in the direction you're looking. It's because there is a spiritual principle. Humans, when they look, they lean. And we see that he leaned toward Sodom. He was relying on Sodom instead of relying on the Lord. He looked, he leaned, and the next time we see him, he's living in Sodom. In Genesis 14, verse number 12, it says, "And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom." and his goods and departed. So he's not just looking, and he's not just pitching his tent toward Sodom, but now he's in Sodom. You see the progression here, my friends. If you're going to stay away from the judgment of this world, you've got to keep your eyes from this world as well, because you will lean where you look. The fact is we all live in the world. We can't stop living in the world. It's not God's will for us to build some monastery somewhere and separate ourselves from everybody around us. But while we're in this world, we are not of this world. Jesus lived in this world, but he was not of this world either. And if he lived that separation from the sin of this world in an example to us, that we don't have to live of the world either. But Lot was relying on the power of this world. And because he was relying on Sodom, and he was in Sodom and working with Sodom and looking at Sodom, when Sodom got punished by Kedorlaomer, by God, Lot was punished as well. Lot was taken and kidnapped by Kedorlaomer because he was in the way of God's punishing of Sodom, of warning them of their coming judgment. So we see that you look, you'll lean, you'll start living in, and finally he was trying to lead sinners. We see him when the angels came there in verse number 9, Genesis 19 verse 1. And there came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. Why was he in the gate? Because that was the courthouse of the day. Lot expected to be a judge in Sodom. But what happened? In verse number 9, Genesis 19:9, the men of Sodom said about Lot, they said, stand back. And they said again, this one fellow came in to sojourn, and he will needs be a judge? Now will we deal worse with thee than with them. See, the people of this world will never accept us. They will let us think that we're leading them, but they're not being led by us. And when it comes down to it, they will reject you just as they rejected Lot. Because the people of this world are not our brothers and sisters spiritually. We are followers of Christ. We should be. But the people who are not regenerated are not. And so, in summary, the problem with Lot was that instead of leading his family, which he should have been doing, he was too busy trying to lead fools who would not ever believe in God. My friends, don't look at the world, because you'll start leaning, and when you start leaning, you'll start living in. Don't follow Lot's road to destruction.